Hello, everybody. This is Gabe D'Antonio. I'm a senior at Ladue, and today we're going to talk about the politics disad, one of the most important parts of any team that's hoping to do well on the negative side in policy debate. So, first, I know you're wondering, what is a politics disadvantage? Well, first of all, a politics disad is just like any other disadvantage. Go back and review our lecture on advantages and disadvantages if you still have questions, but it's going to have a uniqueness, link, impact, all that good stuff. The main difference with a politics disad is that it links to the action of passing the plan rather than the effects of the implementation of the plan. Now, we're going to get more into that later, but I want to start by discussing the pros and cons. The first pro is that the politics disad is truly generic. You can run a politics disad against practically any affirmative on any topic because it's specific to the passage of a plan rather than the plan itself. Now, that's really helpful if you're worried that, you're not going to have anything to run against an app that you've never seen before, or you're worried that maybe an affirmative has been specifically crafted to beat a lot of the disads that are there available on a topic. Well, it's not going to be able to beat your politics disad most of the time. The second pro is that it works super well with an actor counterplan. See, an actor counterplan argues for doing the action of a plan, say eliminating mandatory minimums, but through a different actor. Maybe instead of Congress passing a bill, the Supreme Court is going to make a decision. And the reason a politics disad works so well here is because the politics disad is able to give you a net benefit off a different actor, right? A politics disad about Congress links to an affirmative plan passed through Congress, but not your negative counterplan, which happens through the Supreme Court. Now, what are the cons? Because it's not all good. First, it's often low quality. Part of the fact of being totally generic is that it's a little bit made up, right? It's about a political situation that isn't actually happening, right? A fiated system. And that means the evidence is low quality, the links are generic. That's not often great. The second con is that it sounds kind of ridiculous, especially to lay judges. A politics disad, especially when it's not run well, sort of flies in the face of what we understand policy debate to be. In fact, some people just don't even like politics disads in general, but they are pretty necessary depending on the topic when other disads aren't nearly as available. So let's talk about writing a politics disad. So the most important thing for a politics disad, a wise coach in this district once said, it needs to be ripped from the headlines or hot off the presses. One of those two things. Basically, it needs to be recent, recent, recent. And that's because you're dealing with political situations. If you're talking about a COVID stimulus bill that passed 2 weeks ago, that's a crappy disad. If you're talking about the elections that are coming up in 2 years, that's a crappy disad. But if it's about a bill that's being debated right now, okay, then maybe you've got a link. So what do you need specifically? One, you need some sort of important political action. It could be a bill, an executive order. One that got used a lot in this year, 2020, 2021, was talking about COVID stimulus bills, because those were sort of the most important things that were happening. But, executive orders bills, they're coming up all the time. Different Gov tracker websites can allow you to see what's getting debated in Congress. And if you find something important enough that could get affected, you might have yourself a politics disad. Second, you need evidence about how passing the affirmative team's plan will prevent/cause said political action. So you need some sort of connection between the passage of a plan and the action. So one of the things we talked about was how the Senate has limited floor time, right? They only have so much time to debate things, and bringing up the affirmative team's plan about conservative criminal justice is going to piss off conservatives, and that's going to take away time from the COVID stimulus bill. I don't think I meant to say conservative that many times. It wasn't a great link, but it was at least some evidence about how passing the affirmative team's plan might affect another political action. And then finally, you need an impact to preventing or causing a political action. So in our example, we talked about how waiting even a couple of weeks on the stimulus could hurt an exponential number of people as COVID continues to spread. Now, these examples might be a little bit confusing until we understand some of the core different ways that politics disads work. So there's the bipartisanship disad, the political capital disad, the floor time disad, the writers disad, the horse trade disad, and the election disad. Let's get into them one by one. So first, the bipartisanship disad normally goes something like this. X bill passes now with bipartisan support. The affirmative team's plan shatters bipartisanship, preventing Bill X from passing. Bill X is good. So that was pretty popular. It's one of the most common forms of politics disad, right? Medicare expansion passing now, Plan Rex bipartisanship, Medicaid expansion super important for healthcare. That is a good disad. It links specifically off the sort of partisan effects of passing an affirmative team's plan. Next, the political capital disad. Now, this one's incredibly popular. I will say it doesn't make too much sense because political capital, nobody really gets what it is. But the argument is something like this. Bill X passes now because Y actor has political capital. The affirmative team's plan wastes Y actor's political capital, meaning they're no longer able to pass Bill X. Bill X is good. So the sort of linchpin is what is political capital. It's sort of like how much juice you have left in a car. How many miles can you drive with X amount of gasoline? But it's not a super clear issue. So if you want to read everything there is to read about political capital, you'll love this type of disad. But for the rest of us who are like, I don't really understand what that is, it's sort of a little bit rare. Next is a floor time disad. Bill X passes now, but there's limited time. The affirmative team's plan takes up too much time, prevents Bill X from being passed. Bill X is good. This sort of thing might be useful right at the end of a legislative session when a bill not getting passed for a couple of days actually matters. Or with an issue like COVID, where exponential growth rates mean that even a week of difference is a big difference. Next, we get into a little bit different ones, riders and horse trade. So the riders disad is something like this. Bill X is not going to pass now. However, when the affirmative team's plan is passed, somebody is going to attach Bill X as a rider, so it will get passed with the affirmative team's plan. Bill X is bad. So what is a rider? A rider is something that legislators will do where they say put an amendment on a bill about funding Social Security that does something about limiting abortions. And the hope is that because everybody likes Social Security, they're going to pass a bill that allows, abortion to get limited. Now, the issue is that you get into a debate about whether or not legislators are allowed to attach riders and amendments to affirmative teams' plans, which gets into fiat debates. And it can be relatively confusing because it's really not no actual author is writing about fiat in that way because fiat's not a real thing. So it's all up to the debaters on talking about what exactly a rider is and when a rider might come into play. Now, I think the best case scenario for a riders disad is when you have specific evidence about people putting riders on bills similar to the affirmative team's bill. Then maybe you can get away with it. Though at that point, it is sort of defeating the purpose of having a generic disad because you need such specific links. The horse trade disad has a similar concept. It says Bill X won't pass now. If the affirmative team passes their plan, they'll need to trade Bill X to get it through. Bill X is bad. So one common topic, the immigration topic, was DACA, right? And because DACA was an actual issue during the Trump administration at the time, there was all sorts of evidence about a potential horse trade where the Democrats would get DACA and Republicans would get funding for the border wall. So people had great evidence saying if DACA passes, a border wall passes too. So similar to the riders disad, they had that sort of specific link evidence that was able to link a horse trade disad. But if you don't have that kind of evidence, riders disad has the same problem as the horse trade disad in that it sort of gets into a fiat debate about what it means to pass the affirmative team's plan, and that's not very much fun. Finally, the elections disad, the most beautiful of all politics disad. It says X candidate wins now. Because of the affirmative team's plan, that candidate will lose instead. X candidate good. So these are obviously only effective somewhat close to elections, but they can be pretty great because people just love writing about elections. So there's actually good evidence that's like, if the Republicans triangulate on healthcare, the Democrats are doomed in the 2028 election and that kind of stuff. And then, you're on a healthcare topic and you're like, let me just cut this, and you have a beautiful link. If it's an election year, cut an elections disad. It's almost always going to be great. The only sort of problem is that it's just like an obviously partisan disad. So you might run into the whole like your judge is of the opposite party and get into some trouble there, but valuable disad to have if only for flow rounds. Here's an example politics disad from this year, our stimulus politics disad. The uniqueness. Congress passes a $1.9 trillion stimulus now, but moderates like Joe Manchin need to look balanced to their voters. The link. Passing a progressive policy like the affirmative throws moderate images off, forcing them to vote down the stimulus to look more moderate. Impact. Stimulus is key to beating COVID and restoring the economy. So if we look at this disad, it's sort of like a bipartisanship disad in that it says Bill X, the $1.9 trillion stimulus, passes now. It says that the link passing the affirmatives policy is going to jeopardize that vote, in this case with Joe Manchin, because he wants to look like a moderate who's only voting for some policies. And then the impact Bill X is good. Stimulus is key to beating COVID and restoring the economy. Now, finally, let's talk about answering a politics disad. First of all, answer a politics disad just like any other disadvantage. You've got uniqueness, link, impact. You can contest all of it. Say it's not true. It's probably not. You got to remember, politics disads almost always mostly made up. So answering that uniqueness, link, and impact shouldn't be that hard. That bill probably won't pass. This affirmative team's plan probably isn't going to affect the situation in the election. The impact, come on. The bills ever actually do anything? Now, obviously, I'm joking here, but it's not too hard to just answer on the merits of politics disad. But the sort of approach that you can use with a politics disad that you can't use with any other type of disad is to question the legitimacy of it in the first place, right? In policy debate, we have fiat so that we can debate the implementation of a plan, not the political squabbles that lead to it being passed or not. For example, if somebody said solvency takeout, the Republicans aren't going to vote for your criminal justice reform. And because they didn't, it doesn't pass, so it doesn't do anything. You would say, yes, I understand that, but fiat, we're trying to debate the implementation of a plan if it could be passed. Now, what is the difference between it's not going to be voted for and when they vote for it, there will be X negative effect? Obviously, there's some difference, but that's sort of a gray area that is the affirmative team you can contest in order to try to get a little extra edge against the politics disad. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture about the politics disad, and I hope that you're able to add it to your repertoire of negative arguments and hopefully win some rounds. Thank you.